Let's jump right in. Welcome back to another explainer. Today, we're looking at a pretty intense analysis of how slavery, the actual historical concept of it, hasn't necessarily disappeared. The source material argues it has simply evolved. Instead of iron, we're dealing with invisible financial chains. We're going to unpack what the text calls the economy of enslavement, or اقتصاد الاستعباد. So let me ask you this. Are the days of slavery actually over, or have the chains simply changed form? The text poses this really provocative idea. You don't actually need to own someone's physical body if you completely control how they survive. Okay, here's our roadmap for today. We'll define this economy of enslavement, look at borrowing for needs versus investment, check out a really fascinating analogy about a waterwheel ox, and then see how wealth concentrates at the top before zooming out to how whole nations get subjugated. Section 1. The economy of enslavement, redefining control. Let's look at how the source defines this modern system. The big takeaway here is how this system uses Riba, that's usury or compounding interest. The text argues that by slapping compounding interest onto basic survival needs or everyday trade, lenders basically create this inescapable web. It's not just financial control, it's psychological control too. Think of it like a rigid geometric structure. The analysis points out that these financial systems are completely inflexible. Once you step inside, the rules and the mounting numbers just lock you in place. There's virtually zero wiggle room. Section 2. Borrowing. Needs versus investment. The two paths of debt. So why do people walk into these traps in the first place? Well, the source splits this into two distinct paths. First, borrowing for survival. This is paying for groceries or making rent. This instantly traps a family, sometimes for generations. Then there's borrowing for profit. Now, this feels like ambition, right? It feels like freedom. But the text argues it actually carries these massive, hidden, systemic risks that basically only benefit the lender. Just to put the survival trap into perspective, look at these historical numbers from the text. In UK slum investigations, desperate people were taking loans with interest rates up to 1,300% a year. In Turkey, public loans hit 140%. I mean, mathematically, you literally cannot escape that. The borrower becomes completely subservient. But what about the ambitious entrepreneur? The source outlines 5 possible outcomes for borrowing to invest. You might pass higher prices to consumers, lose absolutely everything, break even after all that work, make a profit that's less than the interest, or make a profit exactly equal to the interest. Notice anything? 4 out of 5 of those scenarios mean total ruin or just working for free to pay the bank. Only the lender is guaranteed to win. Okay, so those are the cold, hard mechanics of it. But we need to shift gears and look at what this actually feels like for the individual trapped inside the system. Section 3, the waterwheel ox analogy, working just to survive. This brings us to, honestly, one of the most powerful analogies in the whole text. The source compares the modern borrower to a waterwheel ox, just walking in endless, exhausting circles to pay off that compounding interest. But here's the kicker. The owner of an ox will always make sure the animal is fed so it can keep working. According to the text, the modern financial system doesn't even guarantee that. A borrower can toil endlessly and still lose their home and their ability to eat. Section 4, wealth concentration and control. The whales of the economy. So if the masses are the oxen walking in circles, where is all that wealth actually going? The math of usury creates a giant one-way vacuum. The text shows how massive amounts of capital are just continuously drained from the working class and small businesses, consolidating straight into the vaults of a tiny group of powerful lenders, the whales of the economy. To really hammer this home, the source quotes an author named Edward Ryman, who compares capital to the bloodstream of the economy. Because this tiny elite controls that blood flow, they have absolute dictatorial power over who survives and who suffocates. If they turn off the tap, the system stops breathing. The text poses a chilling question. Is there any subjugation harsher than this? Now, hold on to that idea of dictatorial control. Because when we zoom out from the individual, the analysis shows these exact same chains being used on a much more massive, terrifying scale. Section 5. Subjugating nations through debt. The macro enslavement. Let's look at how international debt strips developing nations of their sovereignty. According to the source, this happens in 3 main ways. Borrowing from global money markets, getting locked into skewed concessions with powerful states, and yielding to the crushing mandates of international financial institutions. The argument here is that these loans aren't designed to help developing nations. They're actually designed to hijack their infrastructure and guarantee endless interest payments. Take Egypt and the Suez Canal, for example. The canal opens in 1869. Just 6 years later, because of crushing debt, Egypt is forced to sell its shares for a measly £4 million just to pay European interest. And to pay a 5% penalty, Egypt was denied its own canal profits for 20 years. The text uses this to show how debt legally steals a nation's most valuable assets. And this is definitely not just ancient history. By 1993, Third World debt hit $1.5 trillion. $1.5 trillion. That's almost double what it was just a decade prior. The source argues this explosion in debt proves it's not a lifeline. It's a systemic wealth extraction machine, keeping nations subservient. What does this actually mean for the people living there? Well, the source details how in 1990, the IMF mandated that the Egyptian government hike the cost of basic survival goods just to pay foreign interest. Basic food shot up 80%, gas and electricity up 130%. The text argues these institutions literally force governments to starve their citizens to feed the debt. So let's reflect on what we've covered today. From an individual forced into a 1,300% loan just to eat, all the way up to bankrupt nations selling off their infrastructure. The source makes it clear. The underlying mechanism, that compounding interest trap, the Riba, is exactly the same everywhere you look. I'm going to leave you with this final thought to ponder. If our global economy is built on a foundation that guarantees poverty for the many just to enrich the few, are we truly free? Or are we all just walking in endless circles, working on a much larger water wheel? Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and I'll see you in the next one.